Hey folks, today's a video I wouldn't normally do. It's a video about car audio. This is a video for the future, but this is what we're going to talk about right now. What you're seeing right now is my original car's stereo. I have a 2014 Subaru Forester, and I got it without the nav radio. And when you don't get the nav radio with that particular car, like I did, I got leather seats but no nav radio, and only the electric adjusted seat in the driver's side. I kind of did a mix and match on the package. But this is the radio that you would get. This is the simple radio. The biggest feature that it probably has is HD radio and Bluetooth. And this is what you would normally get. It's a radio I actually really liked the design of. You get your two knobs. You get a knob for volume, you get a knob for tuning, which I really like. HD radio, which is good because some stations around here have some HD 2 and 3 sections that have some pretty good programming on them. As we all know, HD radio is not the best quality, but the programming is actually not that bad where I live. What else does this thing have? It connected to USB in the console, had steering wheel controls. It had MP3. It did MP3 CDs, WMA CDs, regular CDs. Supports CD text as well. The AM reception, the AM on this was not very good. The FM on this was better than the AM, but generally the analog circuitry on here for the radio was pretty bad, and the HD circuitry was pretty good, which would give a normal person the impression that HD radio sounds better. It's kind of sneaky that way, but in reality, the FM section of this really just wasn't that great, and neither was the AM for that matter. But it served its purpose for a while until I started using Bluetooth audio with it. The firmware in this radio is absolute garbage. When using Bluetooth with this, audio would randomly cut out when I was using navigation on my phone, and it would interrupt the music. Sometimes the Bluetooth would just cut out. Other times the firmware in the radio would just freeze entirely as far as the Bluetooth module was concerned, and it would just sort of reboot itself. Or what would most commonly happen with this radio is I'd be playing music through Bluetooth or through USB, through a flash drive or something, and the audio would just cut out. You'd see the time keep going on the display, but the audio just cut out. That happened with both Bluetooth audio from a phone and from USB. So for the longest time on this radio, I would just use MP3 CDs because that's all that worked properly, and that was the best way I could get a bunch of music onto this thing and listen to it. And in case you're wondering what radio this is, it's from July 2013. It is a Clarion PF3491. The radio is nicely featured, but this is actually a nice radio. I like the radio, but what kills the experience with this radio is the firmware. The firmware is buggy and awful. And I did a brief look online, and I couldn't find any information about updating this particular radio. I found information about updating the nav radios, but not this one. Now, I didn't research very deeply into that. Maybe you can, but I decided a better alternative was to use a different and much better radio. So I took this radio out, as you can see. The interfaces on the back are pretty standard. You get your antenna hookup. There's the harness for audio and power and all the rest of that stuff. There's a port for USB that's, I think, proprietary to Subaru. And this is a harness that was used for steering wheel controls and hooking it up to the the LCD display up top above this. Luckily, this car was built in line with that. Luckily, this car was built in a way such that the radio wasn't central to every feature in the car. That's on a separate screen up top, and I actually liked that. That way, replacing this radio wasn't that big of a sacrifice. So what did I replace it with, you may ask? A Kenwood DPX793BH, which is, I think, the highest end model of this particular radio. What makes this high-end model, this particular model, this higher-end one, so special is that it has a rear USB port. And my Subaru has a USB port built into the not the center console. I guess it would be the center console. You open the little compartment where the armrest is, and there's an aux jack in there, and there is a USB port. And I wanted the functionality of both USB ports because on the front of these radios, it's not uncommon that those USB ports aren't attached very well, or that they you can just easily break off the USB port. So that's what I did. So what kind of features does this radio have? Mostly the same ones that my old radio does, except added more to it. This has all your basic features on it, this Clarion here, but this has much better features. It's Sirius XM ready, so I could get a subscription to XM radio and listen to it if I really wanted to. But but the FM stations are so good in my area that I really don't feel the need to. This is a double-din radio, by the way, so it fits in the same form factor as the original radio does. This is what you'd call a double-din. What's nice about that is that it gives you a lot of space for a bunch of different stuff, whereas the single DIN radios kind of pack everything together in one tight space. But anyway, the features of this. It has 2 Bluetooth sources, which is one of my favorite things about this. So I can pair 2 different items with this. That means if I have like a friend on a road trip with me, we can just pair his phone to Bluetooth number 2, whereas my phone would stay on Bluetooth number 1 constantly. You can connect up to 5 Bluetooth devices to the head unit at the same time, which is pretty cool. Which is nice that this radio actually thinks of the fact that maybe there's more than one person in the car with more than one, set of music that we want to listen to. It supports the Android Open Accessory Protocol for USB devices, so you can literally just take an Android phone, plug it into the USB port, and you can just play music off of that. And it supports Android 4.1, so you can use a fairly old Android device just as a music player in your car if you wanted to, which I think is pretty cool. It also works with iPods and iPhones. iPods, man. It's been a while since I had one of those. Through Bluetooth, it can use Spotify and Pandora and iHeartRadio. I'm not interested in any of those features whatsoever. Spotify, I think, is the most relevant there, because a lot of people I know use Spotify and make their own playlists with it. Pandora, not so much. That was popular for a while, but not so much anymore. Like I said before, it's Sirius XM ready, so if you live in an area where your FM stations are really bad, get some Sirius XM and get you some good radio. Supports Bluetooth, of course. Qualcomm aptX. I'm not sure what that is exactly, but that tells me that there's some Qualcomm hardware in this, which is kind of cool. You can change the color of the display. It'll do fast charging of Android phones. Front and rear USB, which is the reason I got this particular model and why this particular model is important if you have a car that has a USB port already. OEM wired remote, I don't know what that is. It has RCA jacks on the back to go to an amplifier, has line outs. It has, it's 50 watts times 4 as far as the built-in amplifier is concerned. You can do time alignment of the speakers. It has a 13-band equalizer, which I've made extensive use of, because the speakers in my car have a very hot mid-range, so I needed to adjust my speakers accordingly. It has bass boost, drive EQ, which I think changes it while you're driving. I'm not sure what that is. Something I probably wouldn't use, to be honest. It has a loudness adjustment there, which I don't think it's the same as loudnesses on old stereos, where it's a loudness curve. I think it actually is a loudness compression, similar to something like what the loudness war would be, where it just sort of flattens the dynamics of the sound so that you could hear everything through a long road trip. Like, let's say you're listening to an audiobook where you have loud and quiet passages and you want to hear everything through a busy road where there's trucks going by. That's what that's for. I wouldn't ever use it for music. Supports CD text, supports ID3 tags and MP3s, designed for Windows Media, so it'll work with WMA files. It also works with WAV and FLAC files too, which is very nice. It will also play AAC files as well, but I think only via USB and probably the CD player for MP3 audio, and that's really it. So this radio is packed with a ton of features. As you can see, I've already unpacked it, and it's in my car, and we're going to take a look at that. But emergency alerts, HD2, HD3. It's got a lot of good features to it. This is part of the Kenwood eXcelon series, by the way. Kenwood these days is making very nice radios that don't look too offensive and tend to work really well. And I know some of you may be asking me, why didn't you get a nav radio? When you got your Subaru, why didn't you get the nav radio? Or why didn't you replace it with like Android Auto or Apple CarPlay or just another nav radio of some sort with a touchscreen? I despise car radios with a touchscreen with a passion. It seems like a counterproductive thing to put a touchscreen in a car because you have to look at it to adjust it. So whereas with something like, a simple radio like this, you can feel your way around. While you're driving, you can just feel around and you know what button you're on. To me, that's a lot safer than having to look over at a touchscreen. I experienced that with a Prius that I rented for a while. That had a touchscreen radio in it, and I didn't like it at all. Whereas this thing, I could reach over, and there's the volume knob, there's the tuning dial. It was just dead easy, man. And that's why I tend to go for radios that do not have an LCD, that do not have a touchscreen. I like buttons, I like knobs, I like tactility. That way I don't have to look at the radio just to adjust something like, I don't know, the volume or to tune the radio or something like that. It's just a more intuitive thing for me. I like tactility in an area where safety is concerned. That way the likelihood of you getting distracted by your radio and crashing into somebody is that much less. So yeah, I despise touchscreen radios. This is my kind of thing. Buttons, dials, tactility. So, you've seen the old radio here, this Clarion that Subaru put in stock. What I plan to do with this radio is just keep it around until the point where I sell the car, and then I'll put the old radio back in and sell it like that, because this radio is mine. So, I'm going to keep this thing around, and whenever it comes time to sell that car, this radio is going back in it. So, yeah, there you have it. Without further ado, let's go to my car and take a look at the radio. Okay, welcome to the inside of the Subaru. Here is the radio, the Kenwood. As you can see, it's a pretty glossy plastic, which I'm not a huge fan of. I kind of wish it was matte plastic, like the a Clarion that was originally in this thing was. But, you kind of just have to live with it, because most aftermarket radios are glossy plastic. That's just the way they are. They're kind of stuck in 2009 in terms of their aesthetics. But you know what? I'll take a radio that actually functions properly and that doesn't have the buggiest firmware in the world that barely works. With a glossy front than I would, a radio that's buggy and doesn't work with the matte front. So here's what the radio looks like. It's a pretty simple layout. You got your telephone button here. You got your Bluetooth audio and iPod buttons there. You got your power button here. While the radio is on, if you hit the button quickly, you switch between sources. While the radio is on, if you hold that, it shuts it off. Preset buttons up here. Eject button for the CD drive up there. Or just the CD player, I should say. It's actually trying to eject it right there. You get your backwards and forwards buttons there. This is a back and search button, a display button, which I think controls the dimming as well. And you get these up and down buttons, which this one I think lets you change the radio band itself from like AM to FM and things like that. But there also serve as up and down buttons for certain things as well. And of course the central point of control is this dial here, which is an infinitely adjusting dial. The button in the middle. Behind this flap here you get USB and you get an aux jack. So makes things easy. That aux jack's probably not going to get used that much because I have a USB port that can play Android stuff and Apple stuff as well, so that should be fine. Now I'm not going to need that because in this compartment here there's right right down there, you can see it. There's USB port and aux jack there. I don't think that aux jack actually works with this radio, but the USB port certainly does. So that means is I can take my flash drive that I've prepared for this demonstration out and plug it in there, and that's how we'll be listening to a few things. So let me prepare this and turn the car on. I got to somehow make a video about audio without having YouTube's Content ID system get mad at me, so bear with me here. Turn the car on, let the radio turn on, and now it's in standby, as we can see here. So turn the car off again, and the radio stays on, so now we can demonstrate it. As you can see, it detects my phone. As you can see, I have also made it so that the color scheme of the radio matches the rest of my dash. Most of this is all red underneath the buttons. Even on the steering wheel, it's all red underneath the buttons there. And so I made this match by turning the brightness down pretty much all the way, making it red, having the brightness up a little bit more on the display and making that white. It doesn't look that white on my viewfinder here, but I can assure you that's a white display in person. And yeah, I think it's time to demonstrate this. This is how you go through the settings. You hit the button on there. Let's do HD radio. It's not picking up HD radio at the moment for some reason, probably because the weather's been kind of bad. Well, let's try NPR, see if it'll pick up NPR. It's picking up HD radio, there you go.
Is this something that can really spread on a global scale in your lifetime?
Yeah, we have...
There you go. The radio sounds really good in this car. I can't really demonstrate it too much for copyright reasons, but I can tell you that the radio, compared to the stock one, has a lot more high-end. It doesn't sound as muffled and lifeless as the stock Subaru radio does at all. That's the biggest difference, I'd say, between the stock radio and this one, is the sound quality. You can tell that the amplifier in this is much, much, much higher quality. You get a lot more information out of it, although these speakers don't match this car stereo all that well, so I had to go to the equalizer and turn down a lot of the bass and the mid-range to get it to sound right. So you'll hear how that sounds when I demonstrate a little bit later, but here's the other source. You get USB in the front, which of course is that, and you get USB in the rear, which will be the one in this compartment here. You have Pandora Bluetooth, iHeartRadio, which uses Bluetooth, Spotify, which also uses Bluetooth, Bluetooth audio, which plays music from your phone, which it's doing right now, as you can see. It's playing a Journey song, which you can't hear, but there you go, it works. And it scrolls text as well, as you can see. It's a perfect demonstration of that. Bluetooth audio so far in this car has been flawless. The only time there's been problems with it, it's been on the phone side, where Android's just been being stupid. It hasn't been the radio that's been the problem, like it has been, and that's been a very welcome thing. Then there's aux, which of course is just the aux jack over here. And standby, which leaves the radio on but not doing anything. It just leaves the display running. And as you can see, I've set the radio so it shows my signal level on the phone and my battery level on the phone. It looks like it has 3 rungs as far as that's concerned. So, okay, let's move this to HD radio so I can show you the menus. You get audio control, demo mode, clock, remote app. It actually does have an app for a phone. It lets you use it as a remote, I believe. Tuner settings, display settings. So it lets you select the IF band, the auto memory, and receive mode. It has a lot of features. Generally, all the features here are very granular settings, and the most important out of any of those is the control. You go to manual EQ, which is what I have it set to right now, and you can adjust a bunch of different frequencies, which I'll show you right now. I've adjusted these according to the way I like it for this car. Very nice. There's also EQ presets. There's the user EQ. You can turn the bass boost. It has different levels of bass boost, which I find interesting. What else we got here? Loudness. It has different levels of loudness as well, about 2 different levels. You can turn subwoofer on or off if you have one. Fader, balance, volume offset, sound effect, which basically lets you change the sound stage, equalization, the drive EQ, which I'm not sure really what that does. It sounds like an unnecessary feature to me. The sound realizer is basically a sound restoring feature that I have shut completely off because that just messes with the sound of the audio. You want that to be natural. You can adjust the size of the speakers, front, rear. So the size you can adjust is like 6.5 inch, 4x6s, 5x7s. 6.5 is the default, and I've just left it there because I haven't looked up the size of my speakers yet, and I'll adjust those to their proper size eventually. Your crossover settings, DTA, car, so you can select your car type. Basically, a lot of this stuff adjusts DSP settings. So, there you have it. Why don't we go to USB rear and put in my USB drive? So, this is a weird USB drive. I have to, you have to turn it like this to open it. It's kind of weird. So let's test this port to make sure it works, because I haven't actually tested it yet. Wow, that literally pushed it right back in. Alright, let's try that again. There we go. Now it's plugged in. Now it's reading. So that USB port does work. And you can hear the stereo now. This is with the stock head. This is with stock speakers, by the way. The only thing I've done is put a head unit in. That's it. This is with my custom EQ settings as well. In fact, let's change them to natural so you can hear the difference. Change tracks like that. Lower volumes, it sounds good. And at higher volumes, it sounds good too. there you have it. That is a demonstration of this Kenwood eXcelon DPX793BH. I've been very pleased with this car stereo. It has made such a difference. Just for the short trips I've made the last weekend, really. I made a trip up to just like a 30-minute trip out of the way, and I thoroughly enjoyed the difference this radio made. The only weird thing about this radio is that you need to use an external Bluetooth microphone, which I wired sort of down between here up through where this gap in the steering wheel is, and I've mounted the microphone right here, which looks a little janky and weird, but it's a good spot. People can hear me. I can always remount that later. And that's the only weird part about these radios. I wasn't able to adapt it into the original microphone that's probably up in here somewhere. So that's a little strange, but, you know, that's all right. The other thing that's a bit of a sacrifice with this radio besides the microphone placement is steering wheel control. I opted to not use the module to get steering wheel controls for this radio. And that was because of cost and effort. I didn't want to put much effort into this because I just wanted a radio that worked. And steering wheel controls aren't exactly a high priority for me. As I said before, with a radio like this with buttons on it, I can just memorize where the buttons are, and then I can look at the road and hit the button at the same time. So that solves that problem, and it's not very often that I would be doing that, so I wouldn't consider that horribly unsafe. You know, let's say I get a call. I would look at the radio briefly to see who was calling, then, you know, hit the button to answer the phone, and that would be it. Then just talk, blah, 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 blah. See you later, and that would be it. So steering wheel controls, losing the steering wheel controls in this car isn't the biggest deal in the world to me, because there's not much here that I really need. Honestly, the most, I got the use out of these the most on the old radio. I did use these as well. The voice thing I had to use to configure the other radio at all. It was kind of annoying. But luckily with this one, things are much simpler and easier. So that's the other thing I should add was a bit of a sacrifice, is the steering wheel controls. But you can get pack adapters that let you wire these steering wheel controls into your new radio. That's just something I didn't choose to do because I didn't think it was worth the money to make 6 buttons work. Well, 8 buttons, I guess, whatever. But still. Anyway, on to different things. Putting this radio into this particular Subaru, a 2014 Forester, was very easy. This whole thing here is one trim piece, and you can just pull it off from the top, and it pulls back. If you have entirely automatic climate control, you just unplug a harness, and you can get this thing off and sort of twist it up without unplugging the flashers here, and it's fairly easy from there. I had to pull off this panel here to wire the mic through, but that was really the most difficult part. It's just plug and play otherwise. So, very easy to put this radio into the Subaru. They made it extremely easy, unlike some of the GM vehicles where you have to pull off the entire front. So, yeah, there you have it. So, I'm very pleased with this radio. I would highly recommend this radio to people looking for a double DIN set that does not have a touchscreen and handles itself very well, and sounds good as well. Definitely a radio I would recommend. The Kenwood DPX793BH. And I must add, I'm not a huge car guy, for those of you who are wondering, but when it comes to liking things that function correctly, I'm a very big fan of that. So that was the whole reason this radio got changed. I'm not a freak for cars. This isn't going to be a regular thing, but something this nice deserves a video. You know, I think I'm an audio guy at heart. I'm an audio and computer guy at heart. I really like my music. I really like my audio gear. I really like my computer stuff and my gizmos and gadgets. So this was definitely something that was worth making a video about. I'm not going to make this a regular thing. This isn't something I do every day. And that's why I thought it was worth making a video about. Definitely a special occasion when I put a different radio in my car. So I had some fun doing this. It was really nice to do something myself and save a ton of money doing it myself. Especially with this. I was prepared to fork the cash over to have somebody do this for me, but when I looked up online how easy this was, especially through Crutchfield, it was dead simple to get this done. So anybody can do this as long as you know how to get your dash apart. So there you have it, folks. This is the rare occasion that I actually changed the radio out in my car, and I've been very happy with what I've chosen so far. And I bet you it will live the rest of its life in this car until it gets sold. At least that's my plan so far. And yeah, there you have it. That has been a demonstration of this radio. It's been a lot of fun getting this thing working and getting the EQ dialed in exactly the way I want it. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Have a good one, everybody. Ciao.